breaking news of today. Rahaf Al-Qunun, the Saudi teenager who waged a social media campaign to flee her country and escape her family, well, she's now in Canada. She was welcomed by the Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland.
Rahaf wanted Canadians to see that she's arrived at her new home, but she's had a very long and tiring journey, and so she would prefer not to take questions today. So please respect her. She's a very brave young woman who's been through a lot, and she is now going to go to her new home, and then I'll come out and say a few words.
Al-Qunun arrived at Pearson International just a little while ago in Toronto after an overnight flight from South Korea, Canada granting her refugee status at the request of the United Nations. She says she was abused at home and feared for her life after renouncing Islam. She was on her way to Australia when her passport was taken away in Thailand. She barricaded herself in a hotel room and used social media to appeal for help. Her tweets and her plight went viral, and she eventually got her passport back. Well, as we say, she just arrived at Pearson International. That's where we find the CBC's Lorenda Redekop right now. So, Lorenda, nice to see you. Describe the situation there this morning.
Well, it was just an absolute crush of reporters and camera people, everybody wanting to see this young woman who has gained so much attention online from people all around the world, following her plight with that Twitter hashtag that really took off. It was Save Rahaf. So everybody wanting to see this young woman and also hear from her possibly. In the end, though, as you said, we did not hear anything from her. She walked out of those doors that all the cameras had their lenses trained on, and she walked out with the Foreign Affairs Minister who did speak. Take a listen to Chrystia Freeland.
It was Rahaf's choice to come out and say hello to Canadians. She wanted Canadians to see that she's here, that she's well, and that she's very, very happy to be in her new home. Although she did comment to me about the cold. I told her it does get warmer.
Interesting to see that she came out of those doors wearing a Canada hoodie. Also, that's a mini dress that she was wearing underneath that hoodie, something that certainly wouldn't be allowed in Saudi Arabia. And one of the questions that Chrystia Freeland did not answer, that she was asked repeatedly later when she came out to answer questions from reporters, she didn't answer how this could all affect the relationship with Saudi Arabia, which has been strained, but she chose not to answer that.
Choosing not to answer it, although, as we heard from her, Rahaf was the one to choose to come out to essentially show herself to Canadians to basically say she has, in fact, arrived in this country. Now, we did not hear from her, as you say, but what is ahead for Rahaf now?
Well, she will have to get the help of settlement officials. There were some officials here from the UN High Commission for Refugees to meet her as well. So we know that she will be learning about life in Canada and meeting with settlement officials. And we do hope to hear from her, but it won't be just yet. We were thinking she may speak, though, because she has been so open through that Twitter account, sending not only messages and pictures, but also videos. So not hearing from her just yet, but we imagine that will be happening soon.
And of course, we'll have it right here on CBC News Network as soon as we hear from Rahaf. Lorenda, thank you for this. Our Lorenda Redekop at Pearson International in Toronto. Well, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, as we heard from Lorenda, did speak moments after Al-Qunun arrived. Here's a bit more of what she had to say.
So, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, UNHCR, after speaking with Rahaf, after considering her situation, gave her refugee status. And then the task before UNHCR was to find asylum for her. UNHCR did feel that she was in a dangerous situation, and so UNHCR was looking very urgently for a place where she could find asylum. involved in those conversations, as were other countries, and Canada was glad that we were able to act quickly and to offer refuge to a refugee at the request of UNHCR, and to offer refuge to a person whose life was in danger.
The Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, at Pearson International just in the last hour. Well, let's stay on this right now, because joining us at this moment in time is Lauren LaRose. She is with the UN Refugee Agency in Canada, the UNHCR. She's at Pearson right now and saw the whole scene unfold. Lauren, hello to you.
Hello, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. You know, Lauren, I want to begin with a point that was raised by the minister in the clip that we just ran for Canadians across the country. Chrystia Freeland saying that the UNHCR really feared for her safety. Please tell us about that point. Why were you so concerned? Why was the agency so concerned for Rahaf?
Well, obviously, as we saw with the world, there was a lot of visibility when it came to Rahaf's case, in particular when it comes to emergency cases like Rahaf. We have mechanisms in place to be able to fast track her placement in a safe third country, and so we didn't want to waste any time, and clearly took swift action with the cooperations of governments, and we are so grateful that with the support of both the Thai and the Canadian governments, that we were able to bring her here safely.
What is it about her story, though, that had the UNHCR fast track her refugee status?
Well, as I'm sure you know, Michael, there are instances where when there are concerns, where there are priorities, high priorities, where there are immediate life-threatening situations, we act quite swiftly to ensure that we can resettle and place individuals who might be at risk in a safe third country. There's also something called non-refoulement, where if there is a potential risk, it's an international principle that essentially prevents states from expelling or returning people to a place where their life or freedom would be threatened. Obviously, this is something that was raised with concern in this particular case, and UNHCR, in partnership with our government partners, was able to move swiftly and bring her safely here to Canada.
Safely into Canada, but walk us through now, Lauren. What happens with Rahaf? What does the resettlement process look like for her now?
Well, every individual case is so different, and it's really difficult to give a timeline in her case. And obviously, there is the issue as well of ensuring the protection and confidentiality of individual cases. So we wouldn't be able to comment on the details of any individual cases, and that would include Rahaf. But again, just to reiterate, it's going to be different and on a different timeline for every individual.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, many Canadians want to hear from Rahaf because her story really has captured Canadians in the past week. She did not speak today, but I'm wondering if you have any sense at all of how she's doing right now.
Well, I didn't have an opportunity to speak with Rahaf personally, but saw her come in through the gates with Minister Freeland. You can imagine she had a very long journey. It must be a little bit tired, but she did manage a smile, and it was just great to see her here. In terms of next steps, I think she's just going to take the next few days to probably rest and recoup. She's been through quite an ordeal, and then hopefully we might be able to hear from her in the coming days.
Final witness is also using an assumed name, and again we ask our friends in the media to respect the need for her to protect her family. And we finally call on Naira to testify.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Naira, and I just came out of Kuwait. My mother and I were in Kuwait on August 2nd for a peaceful summer holiday. My older sister had a baby on July 29th, and we wanted to spend some time in Kuwait with her. I only pray that none of my 10th grade classmates had a summer vacation like I did. I may have wished sometime that I could be an adult, that I could grow up quickly. What I saw happen to the children of Kuwait and to my country has changed my life forever. It has changed the life of all Kuwaitis, young and old. We are children no more. My sister, with my 5-day-old nephew, traveled across the desert to safety. There was no milk available for the baby in Kuwait. They barely escaped when their car was stuck in the desert sand, and help came from Saudi Arabia. I stayed behind and wanted to do something for my country. The second week after the invasion, I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor. And I just came out of Kuwait. My sister, with my 5-day-old nephew, traveled across the desert to safety. There was no milk available for the baby in Kuwait. They barely escaped when their car was stuck in the desert sand, and help came from Saudi Arabia. I stayed behind and wanted to do something for my country. The second week after the invasion, I volunteered at the Al-Adan hospital with 12 other women who wanted to help as well. I was the youngest volunteer. The other women were from 20 to 30 years old. While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor. It was horrifying. I could not help but think of my nephew.
Nayira's testimony was rebroadcast across the country and marked a turning point in public opinion on going to war. President George H.W. Bush repeatedly cited her claims.
They had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
3 months after Nayira testified, President George H.W. Bush launched the invasion of Iraq. But it turned out Nayira's claims weren't true. No human rights group or news outlet could confirm what she said. It also turned out Nayira was not just any Kuwaiti teenager. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States, Saad Nasir al-Sabah. She had been coached by the public relations firm Hill & Knowlton, which was working for the Kuwaiti government. We're joined now by the journalist who first revealed Nayira's identity, Rick MacArthur, the president and publisher of Harper's Magazine, the author of the book Second Front, Censorship and Propaganda in the 1991 Gulf War. I mean, so, as we said, this is a turning point. You have this teenager, this girl saying she witnessed this, that Iraqi soldiers came into Kuwait and ripped babies out of Kuwaiti incubators. But she was only referred to as Nayira at the time of the testimony. It wasn't Nayira al-Sabah, so you would know that she's the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador who also testified in that hearing.
Correct. That's all part of the propaganda plan, is to maintain her anonymity, to protect her and her family against reprisals in Kuwait. That was the cover story. But of course, nobody bothered to try to find out who she really was. They just bought the story hook, line, and sinker, even though at the time there were a couple of human rights investigators who were becoming suspicious. I got onto the trail after the war, unfortunately, and was able to run down what really had happened, which was that Hill and Knowlton selected her as a persuasive witness to this atrocity, and it was all part of a campaign to turn Saddam Hussein, at least in the public consciousness, into Adolf Hitler. And the feeling was that they couldn't sell the Gulf War without this. In other words, they had to cheat to win. And that's what interests me about the eulogies for George Bush. He's being presented now as this paragon of kind of WASP respectability and integrity, old school. when in fact he had a violent side to him, a very angry and violent and ruthless side to him. And when you see him doing the propaganda, using the Hill and Knowlton disinformation, you see a side of a politician that's kind of ugly. And we're still, as Juan said, we're still living with the consequences of our having placed troops in Saudi Arabia, because that's what sets off bin Laden finally.
And Rick, in terms of most people, it's been over a quarter century now. Most people don't recall the climate then, but there was significant public opposition to the United States going into Iraq to beat back the invasion of Kuwait, and the vote to approve the military action was very close, wasn't it? So this was crucial, this testimony.
Precisely. You got to remember, in 1991, we're only, 15 years after Vietnam, and there's still this very, very bad feeling in the country that's represented in Congress by senators like John Kerry, that we were conned into Vietnam. It was an undeclared war, and we weren't going to get conned again into another a phony war or a phony pretext. And so it was clear that Bush was going to have to get congressional authorization for liberating Kuwait. And so the vote was going to be very close. It ended up being 52 to 47. It would have been 52 to 48 if Alan Cranston, the senator from California, had come back to Washington to vote. He said he would have voted if it was close. He was undergoing chemotherapy in California. And it's clear that numerous representatives and senators cited the baby incubator atrocity, which was false. It never happened, as a reason for voting for the Gulf War resolution. In other words, these are people who said, well, look, we could figure out other ways to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, economic sanctions, negotiations. There was a feeling that this was about oil. It wasn't about principle, even though Bush posed it as a matter of international law. But these people said, finally, look, if he's really Hitler, if he's really capable of having an army that slaughters, and it got to hundreds of babies by the time Amnesty International gave its official seal of approval to the story.
No, that's...
it was inflated.
That's
it got
very,
even bigger.
very important about Amnesty International,
Right.
the role that it played. It wasn't just Naira.
It wasn't just Naira. Human Rights Watch fell for it. They were neutral officially, but Amnesty International actually put the number over 300 babies. There weren't that many incubators in Kuwait City hospitals. Now, if you want to go back over the record, you'll see how badly the media, how badly the press failed in all this.
Well, I remember my newspaper, the New York Daily News, had a front page. They killed the babies. So the media uncritically accepted this story without any kind of check.
And if he's a baby killer, then, reasonable people can disagree about how to enforce international law, how to prevent countries from invading other countries. But we have to draw the line at baby killing. And after the war, it's not just me. It's John Martin who did the really good reporting. He went around to all the hospitals for ABC News and did what a reporter should do, unfortunately too late. Interviewed hospital personnel, doctors, did a very thorough job. Nobody could cite one instance of a baby being pulled from an incubator by Iraqi soldiers and killed. There were babies killed because of neglect and because of the American bombardment of Kuwait and of Iraq, because a lot of hospital personnel fled. There were casualties. There were infants who died, but there were no babies killed by being pulled from incubators. It never happened.
And this was